Just give her soup, my son told the caterer on my birthday, no less. Nora Roth, widow and retired school librarian, said nothing. They served her pale broth while 20 guests carved filet mignon. By week's end, she'd change the locks, reclaim the deed, and audit every account in his name. She'd raised him in that house, now she was removing him from it. And when he claimed it was all a misunderstanding, the legal notices would speak for her. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. Nora sat quietly at the head of the long table, pearls resting against her blouse like witnesses, framed by the soft afternoon light. The napkins shimmered. The wine glasses caught the light. Everything felt deliberate, curated, except for her plate. Dinner arrived in waves. First the filet mignon, juicy, crusted, carved tableside. Laughter floated as the steak was praised, tender, perfectly seasoned, paired with buttery potatoes and roasted veggies. Then a single bowl was placed before Nora. Pale broth, limp carrots, a corner of bread. No fanfare, no wine refill, just a gentle clink on the plate. The caterer had hesitated once, looking at Daniel. Daniel's nod had been quiet, indirect but decisive. Everyone else dug in with enthusiasm, discussing wine varietals and compliments to the chef. Rachel, Nora's daughter-in-law, raised her glass without missing a beat, as though nothing had been unusual, as though the former chair of every holiday table were merely someone fragile who might appreciate something lighter. Nora didn't reach for the spoon immediately. She watched the broth ripple, the shine of the tableware above it, and felt the emptiness sharpen in her chest. She told herself she wouldn't be angry. She told herself it was her birthday, but there was no candle on her soup, no garnish, no applause, just invisibility disguised as care. Finally, she lifted the spoon. Each sip tasted of salt and filtered light, not nourishment, but dismissal. Across the table, casual conversation carried on. The conversation of people not expecting any rupture, believing everything stayed the same, even as Nora's entire identity had just been portioned differently. She lowered her gaze, lifted her phone, navigated to her messages. One thread blinked unread. June, her daughter, estranged by necessity, by accumulation of betrayal and unmet expectations. Nora's thumb trembled slightly as she typed, "You were right, sent." The silence followed like a patient wave. Daniel cleared his throat and offered an apology that wasn't. "Mom's always loved soup, haven't you? Remember your chicken barley phase?" A few polite chuckles, not enough to mask the message. "You're diminished." Nora kept stirring, not angry, not broken, just She closed her messages, placed the phone back beneath her napkin, not folding it in, anchoring it. The room smelled like rosemary and wine, but none of it peeled away the taste of being erased. Then, Emma, her granddaughter, voice soft and curious, leaned forward, braids swinging. "Grandma, why didn't you get steak?" Nora froze. The spoon halfway to her lips paused. She looked at Emma, bright eyes too young to understand cruelty, as yet innocent to exclusion. Nora set her spoon down. She exhaled. "No reason," she said softly, voice steady. Emma frowned, confusion flickering like a new bloom. Nora met her eyes. They left their masks tonight, she thought, not realizing that by dinner's end, Emma might see too much. Nora nodded once, gently stood. Quiet footsteps guided her away from the table. No tears, no confrontation, just a grace forged in boundary. Silence followed her down the hall like a cloak, but this time, it felt owned. Her granddaughter leans over and asks, "Why didn't you get steak, Grandma?" I smiled and said, "Maybe Grandma's not special enough today." Nora returned to the dining room just as last plates were whisked away. Emma had slipped off to the living room with her cousin. The table looked unconquered, candles unlit, flower stems untouched, the echo of voices already fading. Emma reappeared, clutching her blanket, and satisfied her curiosity with a final, "Maybe Grandma's not special enough today." Nora forced a gentle smile. "Maybe Grandma didn't order the right thing," she replied tightly, voice measured. The humor landed flat between them. Emma turned away, uncertain. When the guests filed out, hands full of hugs and gifts, Nora watched the door close behind them. She sank into the chair Daniel had just vacated. Her pearls gleamed empty reflections in the lamplight. Daniel approached, pale fork imprint on his chin. "I'm sorry about the steak," he said, as though passing a prescription. "We didn't want to upset your stomach." Nora gripped her glass. Her stomach had never mattered. Her dignity had slipped off the menu entirely. She breathed. Daniel cleared his throat. "You weren't going to eat much." His tone was so calm, so practiced, it felt antiseptic, a medicine applied, not care given. His wife hovered. Rach, she touched Nora's shoulder as if patting a stray dog. You always find something to complain about, she whispered, just under her breath, just enough to sting. Nora turned slowly, nodding slightly. She bore the words quietly. She'd learned softness could hide strength. Later, she stepped outside. A cool breeze lifted the hem of her cardigan. She inhaled as the air carried faint wood smoke from a neighbor's grill. She touched her phone. Dialing. Grace answered on the second ring. Hey, how are you feeling? With a breath she hadn't known she held, Nora replied, managed. But dinner was odd. Grace's voice stiffened. Odd how? Nora told her about the soup, the looked-away stares, the ghost steak on everyone else's plate but hers, the comment from Em. Grace said nothing for a moment, then, voice low and concerned, Nora, there's something you need to check. Nora frowned. What is it? Grace cleared her throat. That house of yours. It's still legally yours. Nora blinked, her heart pinched. You should verify that. Make sure no paperwork has changed. No unexpected transfers. It's your property. Nora exhaled slowly. The air outside felt steadier now. It had been her refuge after George passed. The creaky floor, the powder blue door, the ivy that swallowed half the side wall. She'd tended it like soil, but the words hung low in the air like frost. When she hung up, she felt different. Not numb, but alert, as though she was waking up to a horizon she'd stopped planting markers in. She crossed back inside. The rooms felt familiar and unfamiliar. Faces had twisted loyalty. Words had shifted meaning. Now her home, her legal anchor might have been silently repurposed. The guests were gone. The table reset. Candlelight gone cold. Nora moved quietly into the library, pulling her phone into her purse. She walked past framed photos of anniversaries, daisies in hand, grandkids in Halloween costumes. She paused by the mantel, the photograph of her with June, arms around each other, smiles unguarded, ghosts before fractures. She steadied her wrist and sent a message. You were right. Then she tapped Daniel's name in her contacts, dialed. His voicemail chimed. Daniel, she said, voice crisp, eyes burning even though no one could see. We need to talk about the house. She set the phone back in its cradle. The silence that followed felt owned, suspended, steady. Grace tells her that house, it's still legally yours. That house, you never gave it away, Nora. It's still yours. The next morning, sunlight filtered through soft linen curtains. As Nora clicked open an email from Grace, the subject line read, title scan attached. Beneath it, scanned pages confirmed the deed. Nora's name in elegant script, recorded and unchallenged. The house belonged to her, not Daniel, not Rachel. She stared at the screen for a long moment, forbidden relief washing over guilt. I thought I'd signed it away. I let them act like owners. Memories flickered. Holiday dinners in that house. Grandchildren tumbling in and out. The late-night whispers over cups of tea. Grace's voice came through again. They've been living like owners. But they're not. You have the legal power to reclaim. Nora clicked the PDF again, scrolling through parcel history, signatures, dates, all marked as hers and hers alone. A cold realization settled in her chest. Someone had moved into her life and her house without ever earning her name. The betrayal felt deeper than cold soup or pointed jokes. It reached under the floorboards she'd swept for years. For hours, Nora sat in the sunroom, with the documents spread across her lap like an offering. Sunlight warmed the garden beyond, ivy reaching toward the glass. Grace wasn't forcing her to act, just offering a mirror. Do you want to fix what they took? She trusted her own lawyer, but the legal outlay felt heavy. She worried about family fractures, that iron sash between loyalty and justice. Could she bear opening that door? Still, more vividly now than ever, she saw the doorway unlocked. A message blinked on her phone screen. June, her estranged daughter. If you're ready to fight, I'll stand beside you. Nora blinked. That simple alignment across distance mattered fiercely. No pressure, just presence. She typed back, I'm thinking, then deleted another sentence. Do you still love me? Her household waited in idle silence. The empty chairs, the echo of smirks she'd long swallowed. She stood and walked through the rooms, pausing at the bedroom she had once offered Daniel and Rach. Everything still felt precise. Her quilt folded, her slippers in place, but now the ownership felt brittle. That afternoon, She called Grace again. You mentioned possibilities. What comes next? Grace's tone was calm. Title transfer, formal notice of intent. If they've collected rent or made changes, accounting begins. She offered to reach out to a real estate attorney, draft a letter, and help Nora request property access records from Daniel. No confrontation yet, just notice. Nora breathed slowly. I don't need vengeance, I need clarity, she said in a soft voice. Let's start with access. Only formal, no accusations. Grace sent contact details, a map of practical steps, a legal hold, a notary ready. Walking into the kitchen later, Nora found herself staring at the mahogany table Daniel had polished every Sunday. She imagined reclaiming ownership, not to banish anyone, but to reclaim her life's geography. She didn't yet know if she'd raise legal arms, but the idea of silence being the only sanctuary had shifted. June messaged again. You made me strong, now let me help you be strong too. Nora tapped a thumbs up. Yes. In the evening, she lit a lamp in the library, framed her daughter's old pictures beside plaques and bookends, the house's foundation. Her name no longer felt hidden. For the first time it felt honored. She sent Daniel a simple text. We need to talk. No signature, no flourish, just a steady public linehouse. Matters. She didn't know if he'd answer. In the dim lamplight, Nora smiled once, not bravely, just firmly. There was a path ahead, paper and presents lighting it. Grace says, want to see what they've done with your address. A new dinner invite arrived, but this time, I wasn't coming alone. Daniel's invitation appeared mid-morning. Mom, dinner at ours tonight. I'd like to make up for last week. Plain text. Polite, unadorned. Time enough to rehearse. This time, Nora planned to answer differently. When June arrived hours later, the air shifted. Unexpected presence, stirring possible coalitions. Grace had advised, don't react, let them reveal themselves. The house felt smaller, credentials shift. June didn't announce her arrival. She slipped in holding her purse, presence steady. Her eyes met Nora's in the kitchen. A soft nod, company anchored. The meal began in Daniel's dining room. Everything polished but the tension taut underneath. Wine poured for everyone. Nora, mindful, not offered a refill. June's chair sat empty for the moment, until Daniel gestured her in. Polite smile, a silent declaration. Nora no longer walked old rooms alone. Rachel greeted them with bright veneer. I hope you'll like the lamb, she said. I remember you loved it. Under her breath, June caught once. Let's see how long that belief lasts. Dinner progressed. Conversation was safe. Gardening, grandchildren, minor weather updates, no tribute to past neglect. Still, Vanessa's echo hung in Rachel's coy jokes about mom's health and special diet, tactical aimed undercutting. June listened calm. She didn't eat much. Then the pivot. After salad and polite silence, June asked, purely, Daniel, about the city tax bill for the lot. Are you current on that? I didn't see payments listed under mom's name. Daniel's face tightened for a moment too long. He cleared his throat. Yes, all paid on time. June's eyes didn't blink, because I saw a line. Then I saw records indicating a short-term private loan taken out last month using this address. Forks froze. Wine halted mid-reach. Nora kept her gaze still steady, not accusatory but aware. Daniel flushed beneath the lamp glare. I arranged something with a lender, thought we'd been up front. His voice wavered. The surprise in the room crackled. His guilt flickered like a candle misaligned by wind. Rachel's practiced smile wavered. Plates shifted. Nora sensed the unspoken their behavior, long habitual, was finally being questioned by two generations at the table. June leaned forward, calm, not confrontational. They said you were legal guardian, but no paperwork named mom. Lender didn't confirm she signed or consent. Daniel looked at Rachel. She looked away. June let silence stretch, then cleared her throat and said to Nora gently, you weren't paying attention, but you were named on the property. I remembered. I checked. That loan takes more credit risk than great. Conversation resumed. After an awkward beat, stillness buzzed in the corners though. Dinner finished in polite tension, dessert as sugar coating over freshly cracked edges. When plates emptied, June stood first and collected her napkin. She leaned toward Nora and whispered, you did the right thing, not loud, just true. They both rose. June lingered. Rachel loudly asked, aren't you staying? Misaligning warmth and accusation. Nora said nothing. Daniel opened his mouth to apologize again, but Nora waited, calm, presence replacing entitlement. As they escorted Nora and June to the door, she noticed Rachel's lips purse, weight shifting. Rachel softly turned to Daniel under her breath. Audible only to June, she brought her watchdog. Outside the air was cooler. June slipped her arm through Nora. That felt necessary, she said. Nora nodded. Fingertips warmed, not bruised, not broken. Seeing this dinner hadn't been about forgiveness, it was a reckoning, delivered by ordinary chairs and plain questions. Daniel's wife whispers to someone. She brought her watchdog. I pressed record on my phone and slid it into my purse. Nora held her breath as the voice memo timer ticked on. She was in the kitchen after dinner pretending to refill the pitcher. Her purse rested beside the breadbasket. Her phone inside, quietly recording. From the hallway, she heard Daniel's voice, low but sharp. She won't challenge us, she never has. Rachel sighed. She's too wrapped up in being nice to notice. We'll settle things by summer quietly. Nora's hands trembled. She capped the pitcher, retrieved her purse and ended the recording, saved it under a file she'd created that morning, just in case audio won. That night in the dim light of the living room, June listened beside her. The audio played clean and clear, Rachel's words cutting through static like wire. I told you, June whispered, but hearing it still makes it real. Nora blinked slowly. I don't feel angry, I feel awake. By morning, the recording was in Grace's inbox. This confirms a pattern, Grace said over the phone. It may not be explosive in court, but it shows motive, collusion, disregard. Nora jotted down Grace's words in a small spiral notebook. She had started keeping everything, every email, every receipt, every offhand comment that stung but left no bruise. Then Daniel texted, "You're overreacting again. Don't let June fill your head with drama." Nora took a screenshot, saved it. She didn't reply. She labeled it, Gaslight 4:32 p.m. Later that day, she opened her file cabinet, slipped in insurance records, utility bills, the patio delivery invoice signed without her knowing, one drawer labeled legal risk, home items. She made tea, let it steep longer than usual. Silence used to be how I avoided trouble, she told June that evening. Now I see it's how they measured what they could take. June nodded. You're not silent now, you're documenting. They sat at the dining table, no longer guests in someone else's house. They were witnesses, builders of a narrative long ignored. Nora whispered, they think I'm being passive. June poured more tea. They'll figure it out too late. That night, Grace called again. The property address. It's been listed in a private loan, unsecured. Your name's nowhere on the agreement. But your home is. Nora didn't get. She said, get me the lender's info. You're ready? Grace asked. I am. Nora replied, let's file. Quietly, Grace instructed her on the first steps. Notify the lender, preserve records, prepare a formal claim, no confrontation, no drama, just precision. Nora opened her journal. She didn't write reflections, she wrote history. April 12 confirmed, loan tied to house, no consent, no paperwork filed through me. April 13, voice memo saved, verified by Grace. April 14, filing begins, this time with me in the room. She ran her finger down the list. Control wasn't in yelling or confronting, it was in naming. At 9:37 p.m., June texted again, you're changing the story, Mom. I'm proud of you. Nora smiled at the glow of her screen, then Grace sent the final message of the night. It's time to file, quietly. Nora tapped the screen off and walked to the front window. The garden lights flickered, then settled into glow. The house behind her felt suddenly different. Not smaller, not colder. Just her. We'll serve them notice, not with lawyers, but with silence and certainty. Nora woke early the morning after Grace's call, steeping tea while sunlight glinted off empty chairs. At 9 a.m. sharp, Grace arrived at the door with two thick folders, calm clarity in her eyes. No fanfare, no broadcast, just determination. Title paperwork, Grace said, handing one folder over. We're formally reclaiming your ownership. Changing locks, utilities, access quietly. But legally. June walked in behind her. In one smooth motion, she retrieved her phone and snapped photos. The lock core, the utility paperwork, the notarized notice Grace would file later that afternoon. Each image tallied as proof, part of the silent archive Nora had learned to build. They moved methodically. First, Grace filled out the notice of intent to fence off finances, revoke access, and confirm sole ownership. Nora signed. Grace added certification stamps. The documents were filed electronically, and delivered in duplicate to Daniel and his address. Service done. Presence declared. Next came the locksmith. June supervised as the locks were changed. Front door, side gate, garage entrance. The locksmith gave Nora 2 keys. She accepted them with a subtle nod, the weight of them already heavier than on. By midday, Grace helped Nora request utility transfers. Water, power, internet, all under Nora's name only. Grace typed the emails, formatted for formality. Effective immediately. Please redirect account access to the property owner of record. June leaned forward as Grace rattled off the service numbers, lodgement IDs, and follow-up instructions. Nora wrote each detail in her notebook. Silence had become strategy. Precision, power. At 2 p.m., while Grace prepared the recording of delivery confirmation, June sat beside Nora in the kitchen. Nora took a slow sip of tea. I haven't slept this peacefully in years, she said quietly, gaze steady on the sealed envelope that would soon carry certified record back to Grace's files. June set the envelope aside. They'll notice change soon enough, she said. Daniel will ask. Rachel will grumble. But you set the standard. They didn't post announcements. No public declarations. Nora simply let the legal and logistical elements shift, property shifting allegiance back into her name, restored unclaimed. By 6 p.m., Grace finished uploading all documents, screenshots, technical filings, labeled chronologically. Everything fingered a timeline, a truth, a refusal to erase herself again. That evening, Nora felt exhaustion deep enough to ease into. She didn't check messages. She didn't wonder what Daniel might say next. She read quietly, resting in the knowledge that she had fortified what belonged to her, silently but decisively. Late that night, while Nora slept soundly in her own bed for the first time in months, her phone buzzed. Grace, all done. Locks changed, utilities secure, lender notified. You're untouchable now. Nora turned over in bed, satisfaction soft as dusk. No triumph, just peace. Morning came calm. She poured tea in sunlight that felt kinder, steadier. A day unmoved by the shifting allegiances at the table. At dusk, the doorbell rang once. Nora paused. She didn't recognize the timestamp on the caller ID. She rose, clutching her robe close as she walked to the door. She opened it. Daniel stood there, face flushed, eyes wide, vulnerable in a way silence had always hidden him. He said nothing at first, just stood, breath uneven. Nora closed the door behind them, securing it with her new key. She led him to the kitchen table where final filings sat neat and labeled. The room smelled faintly of honeysuckle and resolve. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, She didn't interrupt. He swallowed. I got the notice. And the locks. I didn't think you'd mean it. Nora's eyes were calm. She didn't offer warmth. She offered presence. In that moment, the house felt restored, not smaller, not colder, just her. Daniel shows up on her doorstep, face flushed. He stood on my porch like he owned it. But I knew better. Daniel's voice trembled as the door closed behind him, his silhouette half lit by porch light. He stared at the clean stack of documents on the kitchen table. The papers, certifications, account transfers, a legal reality Nora had already enacted. He asked quietly, "What are you doing with the accounts?" Nora held his gaze. Calm, clear, protecting what's mine. Daniel stiffened. "We took care of this place. You never asked. You never said." Hurt and indignation warred in his eyes, resentment simmering beneath domestic familiarity. Nora didn't flinch. She detailed the changes with measured precision. Notice served to the lender, locks replaced, utilities transferred under her name alone. No bitterness, just clarity, laid like testimony across the table. Daniel's posture sagged, guilt surfaced when he realized the ramifications. He swallowed. "The loan, you're going after that too." Her voice quiet, unwavering. "Yes, you used my home's equity without my consent." Daniel looked away, his face taut. Under the edge of dusk light, he looked smaller, like secrecy had unraveled in the wrong direction. He opened his mouth to speak but closed it again, swallowed by the silence of legal clarity. Nora's heart ticked. She watched the playbook change. He had counted on inertia. She counted on truth. Instead, Daniel accused. "June," she turned mom against me. Nora pulled in the curtains with her calm. "No." I turned toward myself. Her words weren't sharp. They just settled, steady, final. Her realization delivered. He recoiled as if her clarity refracted something he couldn't bear. He tried to respond, hesitation in his voice. "Mom, but she stood. Her resolve was full-bodied now. The repairs had been made. The protocols filed. Words could no longer rebuild what lawful boundaries had already restored. She didn't reach for him. She let the threshold speak for her. A house anchored in law, not mistake. As Nora turned, the door slid shut behind her. Not locked but closed. Invitation withdrawn. Space owned. Daniel's voice drifted through the closing wood. "We just wanted to." Silence tracked behind it. Unwavering. Nora lingered in the hallway. The evening settled softly. Ivy whispering against the window. Wind brushing light across her shoulder. Home felt sharper now. Mapped by action. Minutes passed with nothing but her breath and the hush in the rooms. Then, a soft hiss at the bottom of the door. An envelope, legal, crisp, formal, was slid through. Nora knelt to retrieve it, fingertips steady as she scanned the seal. Another summons. Legal notice served under margin of dusk. She stood, tucked it under the binder, placed her keys on the counter. The kettle clicked quietly. Tea waited exactly where she'd set it earlier, cooling, disciplined. The house exhaled. She didn't race to read. She didn't flinch. The record remained intact. The architecture of her household, rebuilt. Because confrontation hadn't ended. It had merely turned a corner. The envelope lay on the table like a challenge. But Nora had already delivered clarity. Let the record read. An envelope slides under the door. Legal notice. He's suing me for emotional distress for taking back my own house. The morning sun streamed through curtained windows as Nora unfolded the crisp legal letter on her kitchen table. The heading read, "Civil complaint for emotional distress and coercive behavior, filed by Daniel Morgan." The accusation was surreal, claiming that Nora's actions in reclaiming her home had deeply unsettled him, caused humiliation among friends, and constituted elder instability. He alleged that she had coerced him into silence and stripped him of his identity under the guise of recovery. Nora exhaled slowly. Grace sat beside her, notebook open. June hovered behind in quiet support. Grace flipped through the pages. Her voice measured. "It's flimsy, full of pathos without substance, but intimidating, trying to create pressure." Nora's fingers traced the typed paragraphs. Each claim rang hollow next to the affidavit from the lender, the property title, and the notarized revocation forms. Everything Nora had documented, the lock change, utility transfers, recorded statements, was dated, verified, and filed. She'd prepared for this. June shook her head, voice firm. "He's using shame because he lost power, emotional manipulation masquerading as distress." Nora noted the words in her legal log. Gaslight, claim, lacking evidence. Over the next 2 days, Nora remained deliberately silent online. Meanwhile, small murmurs began to drift through community circles, concerned neighbors whispering, curious friends posting support. A few messages landed. "Are you okay? What's happening? Thinking of you." Grace advised restraint. Let public curiosity turn toward facts, not drama. So Nora turned off replies. Let the record speak quietly. In the living room, they gathered, Grace poring over the complaint line by line, June orally mapping discrepancies between the accusations and the documented truth. Nora added everything to her archives, signed receipts, voicemails, installation bills, lender notices, each tag dated, saved. They drafted a countersuit: elder financial abuse, defamation, fraudulent misrepresentation. No hostility, just legal posture. Grace confirmed every filing would adhere to the state filing timeline to meet response deadlines. Nora surprised herself by drafting a public statement in a neutral tone. "I did not eject my family. I reclaimed what was rightfully mine. There is no emotional coercion in protecting one's own home. I welcome clarity and verification, not sentiment." She typed, paused, then saved and closed it. Not posted. By the third morning, her phone buzzed with subtle alerts. Groups on neighborhood websites, Facebook circle. News didn't announce it. Gossip suggested tension. Some speculated Daniel was in distress. Others wondered why Nora had changed locks. A couple of elderly neighbors, faint in their words, shared memories of Nora's kindness valued now in retro. Nora pressed save on each supportive but cautious comment. No replies, just acknowledgement. Grace looked up. "They're trying to frame this as family chaos, but we hold structure. We respond with form. June saw Nora press record on her phone again, before a video call with a local bar association friend. She didn't speak. She let the evidence, the calmness, the method reverberate across courts of conscience, not social media impulses. That afternoon, the countersuit filing kicked in. Nora's response included sealed exhibits, forged lender documents, voicemail evidence, property transfer logs, and Grace's notarized legal witness forms. The filing was quiet, precise, no headline, no threat, just form and function. As the sun softened, Daniel posted on Facebook an image of their old porch swing, captioned, "Pray for us, betrayal cuts deepest." Comments, spliced quickly, concerned views, allegiances assumed. A few friends reached out to Nora. She typed short replies, "Thank you for your concern," and moved on. June saw it too. He's steering sympathy online. But there's no reciprocity in truth. Nora nodded, closing the comment window. That evening, she poured tea upstairs and placed it gently on her bedside table. She didn't sleep immediately. Instead, she lay surveying the timeline she'd built, file names, date stamps, audio clips, numbers traced back to notarized forms. It was more than defense. It was architecture. By bedtime, Nora felt something unfamiliar, exhaustion rooted in dignity, not resignation. In the midnight hush, Grace texted, "Countersuit served, lender notified, files set, we're finished with silent phases." Nora's thumb hovered over her phone. She didn't respond, because she'd already spoken through deeds, documentation to the house that finally answered back. Daniel posts on Facebook, "Pray for us, betrayal cuts deepest." People I hadn't seen in years started calling me asking what I did wrong. Rumors began to ripple just as daylight softened into late morning. Daniel's wife Rachel posted a mournful update on a local Facebook group, a photograph of their lawn dotted with wind chimes and fairy lights, captioned, "Mom's walkout felt harsh, but boundaries have consequences, even in family." It was a plea woven with sorrow, casting Nora as both catalyst and villain. Neighbors sent polite messages. "Is everything okay? Thinking of you during this time." A cousin she hadn't heard from in 5 years called, "What happened to you? I just saw posts in the Ridgeway group." Their tone softer than critique, fuller than curiosity. Nora absorbed each note without reacting. Silence had become her strategy, letting questions settle before answers rose. At midday, Grace leaned over the laptop with focus. "It's time for a short factual post. Keep control of the narrative on your terms." Nora corrected her posture, nodded. When Grace turned away, she began typing. Nora's public letter, "To my neighbors and friends in Ridgeway. In recent days, you may have seen online talk about my home, my family, about the choices I've made. I did not abandon my home. I protected it. I did not evict others. I reclaimed what was always mine. The legal and financial steps taken were necessary to preserve what I built. There is no instability in standing for clarity. I have documented every detail. Property filings, notarized changes, communications in writing. I share this not for sympathy but for transparency. Thank you to those who reached out privately with concern, with kindness and with questions. I am fine. Nora Roth." She paused, then posted in the community feed at 2:14 p.m. No photos, no hashtags, just unflinching language. Within hours, the tone of responses shifted. A neighbor wrote, "I waited to see what unfolded. Your name stood firm." Another, "Thank you for speaking without spectacle." Grace watched the stream, noting the tone change. "Quiet power," she whispered. That evening, a private message appeared in Nora's inbox from a woman named Hannah. "I'm not the only one. He did this to his ex-wife years ago, changed locks, withheld funds, threatened litigation. I kept quiet because I thought it was my fault." Nora reread it twice. Truth pulsed there. Another silent witness reclaimed. She typed, fingers steady, "Can we meet?" She didn't send immediately, sat with it instead, then pressed send. Meanwhile, replies to her letter continued. "I believe you. Your dignity is our dignity. My wife and I are seniors. We've seen too many houses lost by silence." Something shifted. Her presence and her boundaries felt seen, supported. That night she lay in bed, phone silent beside her. The echoes of support hummed softly, not loud cheers but rooted notes. In the darkness, she realized, she had set something in motion. A story once buried was now surfaced. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt visible. Grace's earlier counsel rang in her memory. Let clarity, not sensationalism, guide public truth. Because truth doesn't need an audience, it needs witnesses. Nora replies, "Can we?" She looked me in the eyes and said, "He builds empires on guilt." They met on a Tuesday, just before noon, in a sunlit cafe tucked behind the Ridgeway Library. Nora chose a corner booth, away from the door, and waited with her tea cooling beside her. When Hannah arrived, tall, weathered, with storm-colored eyes, she carried no small talk, just a file folder and something unspoken. "I debated showing up," she said, "but your letter made it easier to breathe." Nora offered a soft nod. The space between them felt both fragile and fortified. "I was married to him," Hannah said. 7 years. Before Rachel. She didn't ask if Nora knew. She already knew the answer. Nora folded her hands over her napkin. "He started small," Hannah continued, "controlling credit cards, tracking my grocery spending, rewriting our story to others, told people I had memory issues, said I wasn't reliable. When I protested, he called it hysteria." Nora's throat tightened. The language was different. The pattern was. Hannah opened the folder and laid out copies, old receipts, a notarized complaint she'd once filed but withdrew under pressure. "He borrowed against my name. When I left, he said I was emotionally unstable, took half my things, and filed a restraining order to keep me out of the house I paid for." Nora traced the edges of the pages like artifacts. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. "He builds empires on guilt." He doesn't need kindness. He needs silence." Yours scared him. A long breath passed between them. Nora reached for the folder. "Keep it," Hannah said. "If it helps, Grace can file it as backup. I'm willing to testify if it comes to that." Nora didn't cry, but something inside her reset like a picture hung back into alignment. "Thank you," she said simply. That evening, back home, Grace placed the new documents into a secure sleeve. "We'll treat it as a sworn affidavit," she said. Discreet, but valid. June wrapped her arms around her mother without words. "You're breaking the chain," she said against Nora's shoulder. Nora smiled, the curve of it gentle but firm. She walked to the kitchen and retrieved her legal binder, now thick with records. She didn't rush. She didn't doubt. She began preparing the final forms: rebuttal affidavit, property title confirmation, and defamation response. Each document felt like a brick laid on solid ground. Late that night, the court portal updated. One alert. Notice of proceeding. Morgan v. Roth. Court date, June 9. Nora stared at the timestamp. A quiet click echoed. As she saved the file, the tea beside her had gone cold, but her resolve hadn't. She didn't call anyone. She just whispered into the stillness of her home, "Let's finish this." The judge sets a court date. My name echoed off the marble walls like a challenge. The courthouse echoed like a cathedral drained of prayer. Pale marble, cold brass. Nora walked with June on one side, Grace on the other, her binder gripped beneath her arm like armor shaped from truth. No jewelry, no fear, just her name and what it meant again. She passed a window, sunlight slanting across stone, and paused at courtroom 2B, Morgan v. Roth, printed plainly, but to Nora it read like history contesting itself. Inside, pew-style benches lined up in expectation. The judge's bench rose 3 feet above the floor, as if justice had elevation. Nora sat quietly. Second row, center. Grace whispered, "We stay calm. Clarity wins." Daniel entered late. 7 minutes. Exactly. His tie was red. Nodded 2 times. His lawyer followed like a shadow clipboard. Confident grin. Notepads already opened. Daniel glanced once at Nora. A flick of the eyes. No apology. Just entitlement. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. Broad-shouldered, clean robe, silver hair and colder eyes. Case 4381. Morgan vs. Roth. Nora's name echoed. Not tender, not accusatory, just declared. Daniel's lawyer stood first. His voice was measured honey, carefully stirred. "This is a case," he said, "of sudden destabilization. Our client Miss Morgan has been emotionally disoriented by erratic behavior from his elderly mother, drastic account changes, lockouts, family disruption." He laid phrases like traps, unprovoked, coercive, external manipulation. The words sounded clinical,
but painted Nora as an emotional saboteur.
She watched the judge's pen tick. Then Grace stood. Her voice, by contrast, was bone clear. No apology, no appeal, just itemized truth. The defendant, Miss Roth, acted within her full legal rights. Title records confirm her ownership. Loan paperwork was filed fraudulently under her property. Account transfers lacked consent. We submit voice recordings, notarized affidavits, and timelines. She handed over 2 folders. No flourish. Just evidence. Mrs. Roth didn't destabilize this family, Grace said. She interrupted a pattern. The judge didn't nod, but he paused longer. Finally, Nora stood. She looked at Daniel, not long, just enough to meet something he'd avoided. I am not your dependent, she said. I am your mother. I am the person who kept this house warm when you forgot birthdays. I did not disappear. You turned your eyes away. And now that I've turned toward myself, you call it betrayal. She raised a single paper. This is the property deed. My name is still on it. Not yours. No transfer. No signature from me. You used it. And I'm taking it back. Daniel's lawyer tried to interrupt. The judge held up a hand. Let her finish. I was silent for decades, Nora continued. But silence doesn't mean permission. It means patience. And mine ran out. When she sat, June squeezed her hand once. Nora didn't squeeze back. She wasn't clinging. She was anchoring. The judge closed the folder. This session is concluded. Ruling to be issued following full review of submitted evidence. Gavel. 1 strike. No applause. Just stillness. As they filed out, Daniel didn't meet her gaze. He lingered by the courtroom door, jaw set, the sheen of his suit dulling in the afternoon light. His lawyer leaned toward Grace. There's an option to settle. Off record. No press. We think everyone would benefit. Nora turned slowly. Her eyes didn't flinch. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just looked him in the eye, and for the first time in the whole proceeding, Daniel looked away. Daniel's lawyer offers. Let's settle off record. They offered me silence in exchange for ownership. I chose voice. Nora stepped out of the courtroom into the late afternoon light. The air crisp and quiet around her. The offer hung behind her like an echo. A chance to sign away her house, settle in private and close the case. It was tempting. It was the silence she'd once accepted. But as she walked across the marble foyer, she realized she didn't want quiet at someone else's price. Inside the cafe across the street, June and Grace joined her with soft smiles and stronger presence. Grace laid a folder on the table. Final court filing. It was heavy with evidence statements, signatures, notarized transfers, hollow threats countered by precise documentation. She pushed it forward. It's locked now, she said. There's no turning back legally. June's eyes glistened. You refused the offer. Nora nodded. I refused. She sipped her tea. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't meant to be. It was sober and slow, like the minutes before a verdict. Over the next morning, rumors murmured online and in the neighborhood. In a private Ridgeway group, someone shared a screenshot of Daniel's post. Home is complicated. Then cropped comments. She never lets go, he's in distress. The tone shifted again, questioning. But gravity had already turned toward Nora's clarity. Grace maintained silence on social media. Instead, she quietly responded to journalists who had reached out earlier, local publications now more interested in elder rights than family drama. She emailed a brief statement. Property title unchanged. No transfer executed. Nora as legal owner factual. Not furious. Nora's inbox remained calm, still cautious. People she hadn't heard from in years now wrote softly, "We trust your strength. Thank you for sharing truth without spectacle." That afternoon, June helped unload a small bouquet of white lilies and eucalyptus at Nora's front door. No note. Nora held the stems. She didn't know who sent them. But she knew. Quiet kindness had its own signature. At dusk, while the golden light curled across the porch, Daniel's public mask began to crack. A post from him appeared again. A selfie in the garden. Captioned, "Strange how words leave fractures we didn't know existed." Beneath it, replies ranged. Trust is built. Broken. Mom is gentle. I always admired her. Nora saved the post. She didn't scroll. She cataloged the tone shift. Later, Grace and June sat with her at the sunroom table. Dossier open. Notes for final confirmation of filings. Decision trees. Closing remarks. Nora read the words counterclaim filed. Title reconfirmed. Cost allocation moved forward. Status undisputed. It looked clinical, but it felt certain. June reached across and laid her hand over Nora's. Whatever comes, they see you now. Nora inhaled and exhaled slowly. She glanced at the bouquet by the window. No name, but she didn't need one. They worked in dim lamplight. Grace locked documents into safe digital storage. June printed a clean copy of the deed certificate to frame. Nora arranged them on the antique parlor table. Her legal backbone, built with pages instead of platitudes. That night, Nora slept deeply. No crowded dreams. No anxiety. A long, restful exhale following months of vigilance. The next morning, the ruling arrived as a calendar notification. Morgan v. Roth. Final judgment. Nora Roth confirmed as sole legal owner of property. Counterclaims dismissed. Defendant liable for court costs. The words felt lighter than air. She opened the PDF. No flourish. No exclamation. Just her name printed beside title confirmed and claims denied. She leaned back. The familiar silence of her home felt steadier now. Not empty. Real. Later, June arrived again at her door. Eyes shining. She embraced her mother gently. You built peace, she said. Nora smiled. For the first time that felt unguarded. They stood together in the sunshine by the door. The bouquet nodded beside them. Its petals caught the light like affirmations. Beyond the door, the house stood quiet, its rooms now hers in law and lineage, its thresholds no longer uncertain, boundaries redrawn, but not bitter, just restrained with dignity. Nora turned the lock quietly one more time inside, then opened the door to June, to Grace, to home, because this time she opened it to warmth, not confrontation. The ruling is delivered, and it's in her favor. The judge looked directly at me and said, "You have full legal authority." Courtroom 2B was hushed, but the moment carried a weight that filled the space. When the judge announced my name and property rights were fully restored, declaring the counterclaims dismissed, and ordering the defendant liable for court costs, the air shifted. It was the sound of justice reclaiming its bearings. I sat mid-bench, flanked by June and Grace. June's grip on my hand tightened, while Grace pressed her lips into a line that held back relief. Nearby, Daniel lowered his gaze, shoulders folding inward. He didn't stand when the verdict was read. He couldn't. Silence followed the final gavel strike, louder than applause would have been. His wife Rachel rose abruptly. Her chair scraped. She stalked out without a word, leaving her purse behind on the seat. A small gesture of hasty departure, like leaving behind borrowed belonging. Grace stood, practically lifting me up as we exited the courtroom. I was dizzy with every document signed, every courtroom exchange, all culminating in this moment. When I wrapped my arms around her, June joined the embrace, her voice thick. "You did it." Once outside, a flurry of reporters gathered near the entrance. They asked questions, few were kind. I answered once. I stood up. That was enough. I folded my hands and walked past with June at my side. Grace followed, holding my legal binder free of weight. We made it to the car amid a soft cloud of clicking shutters and murmured lines. Didn't expect that outcome. Family drama to courtroom. But I heard only the thrum of clarity in my chest. When I got home, the house felt fuller. Not crowded, just at peace. I expected Daniel to have returned by now. Instead, I found him on the porch, tall beyond hesitation, though awkward still. He wouldn't look at me. Can I rent the basement from you?" he asked. Voice low. The words landed like a question I didn't know I'd already filed. A request that made me ache. Not from denial but from the irony lodged in its structure. He was no longer co-owner. Now he wanted to pay rent to the woman he sought to remove. I exhaled slowly. The house smelled faintly of honeysuckle and ledger ink. The bouquet of lilies and eucalyptus still rested on the foyer table, petals steady, a quiet allegiance. I thought of June in the car, of Grace on the courthouse steps, of every document stamped, every signature reclaimed. The weight of ownership had shifted. Boundaries had not just been drawn, they'd been enforced by law, word, and resolve. I led him inside, stepping past every framed photograph, every artifact of shared memory estate, of a home I never surrendered. He followed quietly, as though afraid those walls might challenge him again. "You are welcome," I said, voice steady, "but I don't rent what I reclaimed." You have two choices. Come as family or leave it empty. He swallowed visibly. I wanted him to understand that boundaries weren't banishment. They were reclamation. Space belonged to dignity. He nodded, slowly. No apology, just resignation. Then he turned and left without another word. The door closed softly behind him. I didn't lock it. Homes aren't built on doors. They're built on ownership. Later, my phone pinged with a message from Grace. Judgment backed by law, heart, and truth. Another message from June. You built it. Let them recognize. I stood in the hallway, feeling the house echo. No longer quiet with absence, but quiet with justice. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need closure. Because this time the door remained open. But the power stayed with me. He asks, can I rent the basement from you? He wanted a room in the house he tried to steal. I gave him an answer he didn't expect. When Daniel's request landed, renting the basement, the air didn't shatter, it sized itself, drawing taut around the words. He stood uncertain on the hallway threshold, failure and need sketched across his face. I didn't speak at first. The silence held clarity. No, I said, voice calm as linen. This isn't your fallback. Daniel's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to the framed family photos lining the wall, each a memory he'd tried to rewrite. I have nowhere else to go, he said, voice rigid. Then reached into the hallway closet where I kept a list, local shelters, support networks, and legal aid contacts. I unfolded it and held it so he could see. Here, these organizations will assist you. You're welcome to use them. He hesitated at the paperwork, anger flickering. I thought family meant I had a roof. I didn't lease my family. I replied softly, turning to lead him past the living room into the foyer. This boundary isn't punishment. It's protection for both of us. Daniel's voice lowered, though his shoulders remained tense. You're making me homeless. Grace appeared then quietly standing beside me. She nodded to the list in my hand. It's a line, not a sentence, she said. It protects her life, not erases you. He didn't retreat. He glared at Grace, frustration coiled in his posture. But I didn't flinch or soften. My answer didn't waft like ambivalence. It held shape. I made space here, I said, voice steady, but not on terms that erase me. At that moment, June joined us in the hall, her expression turbulent. She glanced between me and Daniel, her loyalty anchored beside mine. The air hummed with possibility, confrontation, and truth too long postponed. Daniel finally turned away. His footsteps were hollow as they touched the old wooden floor. He paused at the threshold, finger tracing invisible lines on the doorframe. Memories maybe, or regrets. Without another word, he left. The door closed behind him, not slammed, just quiet, decisive. I stood in the hush, unshaken, not triumphant, just grounded. Later I found the draft letter in my study, typed on Daniel's laptop, untitled, half-written. I sat at the writing desk and read, given her memory and health concerns, I propose assisted living placement within 6 months, intended for her safety and social care. The words twisted me, not with fear but with grief, for the presumption behind them. He'd already mapped out removing me from my own life, under the guise of care. I carried the letter into the living room and placed it on the hearth. No fanfare, no hesitation. I struck a match and let the flame catch the edge. The paper curled, blackened, then surrendered to ash. As the draft letter burned in the fireplace, I didn't mourn permission I never gave. I acknowledged ghosts I refused to give voice to anymore. Grace stayed beside me, just behind in the shadows. June joined after a moment. Quiet, steady, aligned. We watched ash drift as loyalty and legacy redefined themselves. No cries, no pleas, just the soft crackle of that paper's ending. And something broader began. Because boundaries weren't walls, they were the foundation I built to keep my dignity intact. Nora burns the letter in the fireplace. No more ghosts. He said I was fragile, but I've never felt strong. That evening, the front door of my restored house opened, not with hesitance, but with intention. June crossed the threshold first, carrying a birthday pie and a small succulent plant. Grace followed, her presence steady, eyes bright behind sympathy's shadow. I stepped to the foyer in a linen dress I hadn't worn since before the silence shifted. We moved into the dining room where the table had been carefully reset. Linen runner from my grandmother, wine glasses polished, steak plates, now waiting for 3. No corners tucked, no hushed tone. This dinner was modest,
real and entirely ours. When Grace pulled apart the foil lid, revealing medium-rare steaks beside buttery potatoes and crisp asparagus, I caught my reflection in the window, steady, strong, nourished. We sat. June lifted her glass, eyes glinting. To boundaries, she said quietly. Grace raised hers too. And soup, only when it's asked for. I smiled, not out of irony, but relief. The air brightened. Conversation unfolded the way a steady flame does, not explosive, but warm. We spoke of winter plans, the garden, the book I'd started drafting, late blooming notes from a quiet rebellion. I told them the title felt true, that the voice I had found belonged in the world, even if it started late. When dessert plates appeared, light fruit tarts, instead of custard, I noticed laughter hadn't been forced. It filled the room, shaped by presence, rather than absence. At the table's end, Grace placed a small velvet box beside me. Its surface shimmered faintly. I opened it to find a fountain pen. Classic, weighty, with sheen like midnight ink. You need this, Grace said softly. Time to write your own version. Tears did not come. Instead, I traced the pen's clip, the curve perfect, purposeful, like the moments finally aligned. I lifted my glass again. To new chapters, I said. Grace grinned. And to endings that build instead of break. After dinner, June and I tucked dishes, while Grace loaded wine glasses into the dishwasher, clean as final agreements. Later, I carried the pen and my laptop to the study. The room felt familiar, honest. I powered on the screen and opened the blank page. Above it, I wrote, late blooming notes from a quiet rebellion. Soft saplings of words took root. I drafted my first post, an overview of silence, measured against action, loss redeemed by documentation, peace discovered not in absence, but in reclaiming. I paused, saved the draft, then clicked publish. On the screen appeared a single message notification. Thank you, your story saved me. My chest tightened, not with vanity, but with the weight of witness. Another voice reclaimed by clarity. That night, I paused at the hallway mirror. The image gazing back was not starved of recognition. It was resolute. The faint lines around my eyes spoke of storms, weathered, but survived. The hands, steady, as though carved from careful decisions, not concession. I did not dare to cry. Instead, I smiled, softly, because for the first time in years, I saw someone whole. No echoes of erasure, just presence. Nora smiles into the mirror and finally sees someone whole.